Okay, I have 4 minutes to film this video before kickoff, so let's do this really fast. Today's video is going to be where to start if you're getting into classic literature. So last week, 2 weeks ago, sometime in the recent past, I did a video where to start with Shakespeare. I will be mentioning that in today's video, but I wanted to do one where to start with classic literature. Now, I swear I filmed this video because this is my old notebook, this is my new notebook, and I don't know where it is now, so that's that. Let's get into this really quickly. If you are wanting to explore classic literature, if you're wanting to get into classic literature, it's obviously a very expansive topic, and it's hard to know where to start. It was hard for me to know where to start, and I don't know if I necessarily started in the right place, but I started where I started, and that was that. So let's do this. The first thing is fantasy. If you're wanting to get into fantasy series, if you have previously read loads of fantasy series, like I have, lots of modern fantasies, I think one of the best places to start is with Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy. It is a deep, complex world, and it's the first book that I think that really embraced that genre of fantasy, epic fantasies, big world building, lots of creatures, and really just taking you out of reality and putting you into somewhere else. I think the Lord of the Rings trilogy does that in a brilliant way. So check out the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The first one is The Fellowship of the Ring, written by J.R.R. Tolkien, and it's fun because there's also movies. So I will say that sometimes it's hard to get through big epics, including the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but if you just take some time to like really be keen on it, it's a great read, and then it's fun also to watch the movies afterwards. The next category is romance. I don't really love romance novels in general, and I read a romance novel earlier this year by the same author, and that was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I didn't love it, but I have heard that her books, Emma and Pride and Prejudice, are way better, so we'll probably be reading those sometime in the future, but I would say start with some Jane Austen if you're interested in romance. One of the things that I like about classic romance over modern romance is that it's a little less sexual. I think that, it's hard to find clean romance, and Jane Austen definitely was. They were a little bit more prudish in the Victorian era. Next up is sci-fi. So if you read lots of sci-fi books, you may want to start with Dune. I have not yet read Dune. I imagine I will be reading Dune sometime in the very near future because they are putting out a movie soon, and I think it would be really exciting. So I don't always read sci-fi. I've read a few sci-fis, but I haven't read that many. It's not my favorite genre, but if I were to say that there was somewhere to start in a classic book for sci-fi, it would be Dune. Next up is Gothic literature, and by far my favorite book in the Gothic literature category is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. It's just the best one there is, and I think my favorite part is that, first of all, we have no idea what we're talking about when we call Frankenstein, the Frankenstein monster Frankenstein. But I think it's a story that's been told in a lot of ways, and I think reading the original classic is really special. And there's two books. There's one she published first, and then one she wrote first, if I'm not mistaken. So keep an eye out for that. I don't remember exactly. That's only a half idea, so let me fully flesh out that idea before I share it. But it's great, and one of the things about all classic literature is that the reason it's a classic is because it's really honest and authentic to the human condition. And I think Victor Frankenstein and Creature do a really good job of challenging us to ask the question, who is the monster and who is the man? And I think that's something that we all need to think about, because in a lot of ways we're all the monster, and it's not because we're made from different body parts. So Frankenstein is the place to start. If you're interested in mystery novels, by far my favorite is Sherlock Holmes, the entire Sherlock Holmes collection of stories by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Absolutely obsessed. I could read Sherlock Holmes exclusively for the rest of my life and probably be okay. They're great. They challenge your head a lot. They're not books, honestly. I mean, I don't read a lot of mystery novels, but Sherlock Holmes is not something that I can read and do other things at the same time. You know how some books you can be like, oh, I'm reading it, but also there's music in the background, or the TV's on, or somebody's doing something. Not that with Sherlock Holmes, because I'm always trying to figure out what he knows, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's stories are so short because they were originally written in newspapers, that you can do that. Next up is fairy tales. Gotta start with the Grimm's brothers. My favorite thing about the Grimm's brothers is that a lot of their stories, not a lot of their stories, but a fair few of their stories have been turned into Disney movies. I'm obsessed with Disney, always have been, probably always will be. Absolutely love Disney, but watching the movies when you're like 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, and then reading the books, reading the stories later is like a whole new world. And so I think that it's great to see how fairy tales have evolved, what we believe as what fairy tales are as children of, you know, Walt Disney, and what fairy tales used to be. I think is a lot of fun. If you're interested in checking out dystopias, the OG place to start is 1984 by George Orwell. I will put a link to our George Orwell playlist, because let me tell you something, that book had me twisted up. We read it before the 2020 election, and in the, you know, the chaos that is the 2020 year, and 1984 definitely had me jacked up. It tells the story of Winston Smith, who is living in London in a perpetual war, and how kind of this excessively socialist government takes over, and how life just generally sucks and there's no hope for existence whatsoever. So if you're interested in a dystopia, that's a good place to start. The last book that I want to mention, specific book that I want to mention, if you're interested in philosophy, I would recommend checking out The Confessions of St. Augustine. I've talked about this in the past. I read it for my Lenten penance a couple years ago. It was exhausting, but it definitely does a lot for your head. It's kind of biographical, kind of philosophical, kind of theological. He's doing a lot in there. And it's basically him writing his life experience coming to Christ. And it's interesting to see how he viewed the world from Antioch at the time. So, which was what, 1800 years ago? Like a long time ago. Maybe not that much. 1700? 1600 years ago? A long time ago. So, The Confessions of St. Augustine, great read. The last thing I want to talk about is Shakespeare. Everybody should read Shakespeare. I believe that wholeheartedly, completely, and truly in my heart of hearts, that everyone should be reading Shakespeare. So do check out my playlist about Shakespeare. I did one of these videos, where to start with Shakespeare. And so check it out. Books on there were Othello, Julius Caesar, King Lear, Richard III, Hamlet, The Taming of the Shrew, and Macbeth. I go into greater detail on those stories in that other video. And we also have playlists for some of those. We will have playlists for them again in the future, by which I mean when we read the other ones. So yeah, I am going to go watch football now. Goodbye. Thank you for watching.